Okay, good morning, everyone. Our clock shows that it's 10:30, and we know that we've got many participants on already, and so we want to start on time and share a few things with you and get you on with the rest of your day. I'm Tammy Mitchell, and Jay Scott is here with me, so let's do a little bit of a sound check. I have everyone muted. But you should be seeing my desktop that has the Gemini participant agenda on it. Somewhere on your screen, depending on how it's set up, you should be able to unmute yourself. It should be a little hidden taskbar either at the bottom or at the top where you can unmute and remute. You can stop your video if you don't want everyone to see you. Feel free to do what's comfortable for you. And we ask that you go ahead and enter your the roll call in the chat. Many of you have already started doing that. We will be looking at the Padlet, and in the chat, the very first thing that Jay entered this morning was the link to the Padlet in case you have not yet saved that. So, yeah, so let me know if you can hear us. Put it in the chat or wave at us if your video is on. Otherwise, we don't know. We don't know if you can hear us.
Okay, we need to get to the Padlet side.
We can hear you. All right, very good. Then we will go on. The agenda is in front of you. We wanted to let you know kind of the flow of what we're going to be doing today so that you'll know that there will be plenty of time to ask questions. So on the agenda here, we've got a few conversation pieces. We're going to be showing you a timeline. We're going to be talking about visits that some of the other schools have been doing. We're going to share some resources. And then at the end, we've got time for other questions such as general questions about other KSDE initiatives, state policies, and et cetera. Jay and I may not know all of those answers, but those are things that we can certainly track down for you. So just wanted to give you kind of a heads up of what you can expect with our time today.
Perfect. So good morning, everybody. This is Jay. And if you're not, one thing that we heard from the mixer last week, I talked to a couple of groups of Gemini schools that were there and asked them just frankly, how can we improve these Zoom meetings? And one of the things that they brought forth was a little bit more time to discuss some of the questions that we have. So if you're not already doing this, I know I can see from the view that some of you are meeting as teams, but if you're not already doing this, hopefully we would suggest making an effort to meet as a team on these Zoom meetings so that, because today we're going to give you some time just to discuss. We'll just go silent and we'll ask you to just discuss there as a team some of the discussion questions. So hopefully that'll be something that can work in your schedules. I know at times it's hard to move out of the building or have people come in. So if you can meet as a group, that would be great. Today, if you're by yourself, you're flying solo, feel free to use the private chat feature if you've got other people from your district on the call, or you can just chat with us. But that's just something from today on that we felt like was a really good idea as we move forward.
So we're going to start with a little icebreaker question. And you know what's funny about these Zoom meetings so far is that I told Jay I feel kind of like a radio announcer, you know, like we're just talking into a microphone and nobody's talking back. So please don't be offended that we muted all of you, because we do want you to unmute and talk and also use that chat feature. It's just that when we mute everyone, that keeps some of that feedback down. But here's your icebreaker question. Give an example of something you've done this week around redesign that you feel proud of. You can either unmute and talk, or you can enter it into the chat. So we'll give you about 90 seconds to begin that conversation.
Well, this is Jason Endicott at Ashland, and one of the things that we really we're really starting here at the elementary school anyway, is using Seesaw which is we're pretty excited about it because it shows it kind of allows us to kind of brag about what we're doing in the classrooms and everything with the kids. And then also it fits right in with our family engagement piece in our relationship rubric. So kind of get everybody excited about that and moving forward it's really fun to watch kids post those things and teachers to literally get a brag about what they're doing in the classroom.
Sounds really good, Jason. So that you said that's Seesaw?
Yeah, we had a new teacher, new to our district, who had used it previously in the Kansas City area, and we were talking about it, and it really fits very, very well with what we want to do.
That's interesting you say that, because Meadowlark Elementary and Liberal was just adding Seesaw to their list of things that they want to research and possibly try out next semester. That's exciting.
Tell them to come and visit us. We'd love to show it off.
Awesome. I'll do that.
Thanks, Jason. And we're starting to get quite a few from the chat. People having really good community meetings, a good discussion about project-based learning with parents. Site council meetings, we're starting to see that in the Mercury schools too. They're starting to start communicating with groups outside the redesign team, making sure the message is right and sharing those things. So Kelly and Dighton, they've developed and sent out a questionnaire to parents and patrons seeking data on what they want redesign to look like. That's excellent. And then school improvement feedback from parents at parent-teacher conferences. I know it's about that time, right? Parent-teacher conferences hitting across the state. Great time to reach out to parents and community members on redesign.
I see where they were able to have breakout groups with teachers to brainstorm ideas, exciting ideas to explore. And yeah, David says we use Seesaw in almost all of our classrooms. Good. Oh, ordered a good number of books to research. Hey, if you could shoot the titles of those books to us, we can post those on our resources here on the Padlet, or you can post that as well.
And in a deeper dive into the 4 missions, that would be really neat to hear what those 4 missions are. I know that that's what our research teams are working on right now, or maybe goals or tenets or missions. So it'd be interesting to hear what those 4 missions are. So Max in Hillsborough met with post-secondary partners about teacher development. That's a huge piece of this, is that the changing role in the teacher through redesign, and then eventually, well, hopefully at the same time, our teacher prep programs will definitely need to change to accommodate that new role that teachers have in these redesigned systems. 100% participation, student-led conferences in Dighton.
All right.
That's awesome. I'll tell you, I don't think when I was going through Dighton there, I think my parents kind of shied away from going to parent-teacher conferences, probably because of the way I acted when I was at Dighton. But I don't think they ever got 100%. That might be the first time, Kelly. Congrats. Oh, some people watch Most Likely to Succeed. Hopefully your teachers found that to be of value. It's an excellent video. It's an excellent video to show a different way to do school.
Newton is working on wigs and battle wigs. Way to go, Newton. Yay. Anyone else want to unmute? We'll stop talking now so you can have a turn.
Hey, I see from the Padlet that you had a visit to Epic Elementary. Can you tell us a little more about what you saw there? Because I had the opportunity to go there last year and see that, and it was an eye-opening experience.
Yeah. Yeah, absolutely. It was so, I have done thousands of classroom walkthroughs throughout my career. I have never seen anything like Epic. I've never seen anything so amazing. I came back and told our commissioner that when I need a mental health day, I'm trekking back over to Epic Elementary just to hang out with them because it was so wonderful. So I'll tell you a bit about what I saw. I toured with the instructional coach, and so I got I didn't get the public tour. I kind of got the behind the scenes tour, which was really amazing. So I was really curious about what they were doing with core instruction and tiered interventions and and their projects, because there's been it's one thing to see the documentary Most Likely to Succeed and be wowed and awed by that, but then the elementary people are like, oh my gosh, what does that mean for elementary, right? And so Epic, what I saw was I spent a good deal of time in first grade. Well, they call it Studio One. And what Epic was able to do was they planned their redesign and then they remodeled a building, an old school building, to accommodate it. So their rooms could accommodate what I'm going to tell you. But in each, they have one studio for each age level. So there's Studio K, Studio 1, Studio 2, etc. And they have 50 students in one studio. That's 50 students in one room. And every elementary teacher is like, they just pucker when they think about that. It's like, oh my gosh, what does that mean? Well, they have two fully licensed teachers who co-teach within this room of 50 students, right? And so at the primary level, their morning is core instruction. And so it's reading and math kind of, within this block of time. And then there's quite a bit of student choice as to what students want to work on. So they've got little checklists. And so, one of the checklists for the first graders, it had so many Lexia Core 5 lessons that they needed to do, and different things. I can't remember exactly everything, but what they were doing was, okay, the teachers were doing small group instruction. So one teacher was they were using their district reading series, and they were doing small group guided reading. And the other teacher was pulling small groups, 5 or 6 kids at a time, to teach them new math concepts. And all the while, the others were on one-to-one iPad devices, and they had their little playlist of things that they had to do for the week. And they could choose, what order they wanted to do it in. And when they finished things, they just colored the little star on their paper. And so I was asking them about what I saw with 50 first graders in the room in the first week of October was that they were all on task. And I spent a good deal of time in there because I was like, how is this really going to work? And some of them were reading independently. Some of them were doing partner reading. But, the teachers then were using that real-time data to teach, new concepts in small groups, but also to do their interventions throughout this time. So what's really neat about it, and what the instructional coach was saying, is that interventions happen organically because they've got real-time data that they review every single day. So because the kids are in this space for this large chunk of time with lots of different things to do, they don't lose any time in transitioning. There's no, walking kids to different interventions all around the building. They're able to recoup just a ton of transition time. So that was really, really interesting. And then because each student has their personalized plan, nearly all of their special education services are push-in, because the kids are in their classroom, they've got their own personalized plan. Students with special needs, that plan has been collaboratively planned with an expert in special education. And so that was super, super interesting. And then I also saw 4th, 5th, and 6th, or 4th and 5th grade with their projects. And so in the afternoon, then they flip. So at the primary level, they do their core instruction in the morning, and then in the afternoon, they have specials and project time. and then it's kind of flipped for the older kids. But during the project time, then each of the classrooms, again, 50 students in one room with 2 teachers. The 3rd, 4th, and 5th grade rooms have a maker space as part of their classroom. And then they also have a very open kind of commons area where there's flexible groups, flexible seating, a lot of flexibility between studios. So they were working on different projects. And so with the Studio 5, they have a garden right outside their door, and the 5th studio is in charge of the vegetable garden. And so they learn all about the soil. They learn, what kinds of chemicals and fertilizers are needed. They take care of the plants or the crops. They pick them, harvest them. They run a farmer's market. So they're doing all of the business things. 4 little boys were building a drone, and so they had free access to go right outside to, practice flying their drone and fixing certain things on their drone. I saw 2 little 2nd grade girls. They were sitting side by side with a Mac book, or each of them had their own Mac device, and they were building a 3D marine habitat on their computer to, then print with a 3D printer. They were going to be entering that into a competition. So they were collaborating and using what they had learned from their research about marine habitats to figure out how to build a representation that they were going to do with that. And the thing that was really interesting about EPIC too, about their projects, is they figured out, what's developmentally appropriate. So kindergarten projects look like kindergarten centers. They look like, they're not the long-term projects. If they start with maybe a week-long project, but they're scaffolding those skills of how to do projects, how to cooperate, how to work together. And then as kids get a little bit older, each year they're building in different skills and different paradigms of how to approach problems. So, yeah. So let's see here. I got a couple of questions. Did I miss how they acquire the real-time data and the software? Greg, I would have to go back and look at what particular pieces of software that they were using. The thing that they do with their scheduling, though, is because it's so important for those 2 teachers in that studio to collaborate, they built in, they do a longer school year, right? So the kids start August 1 and they go through mid-June, but then each day has fewer minutes. Contact minutes, so that teachers have their specials time for planning, and then every day they have from 3 to 4 p.m. where that is completely dedicated to those 2 teachers going through their data from the day, going through what kids were doing on Lexia, what kids were doing on, I think, Dreambox, what that data was showing, what they saw when they did small groups, and then planning for the next day and planning, okay, we've got to make sure we touch base with these kiddos on this because they weren't getting that concept based on their data. So, that dedicated time every single day to collaborate, because their protocol, their standard operating procedure is that when during class time, those teachers are engaged with students. They're not trying to plan on the fly, which is what happens so often when you get more than one adult in a room and you don't have dedicated and focused planning time, is that those adults end up, in the corner of the room trying to plan on the fly when they really need to be engaged with the students. And so they really set up those structures so that that's dedicated. That 3 o'clock to 4 o'clock collaboration time is sacred. No other meetings, no early, they're committed to not leaving early, to scoot out for a doctor's appointment or what have you, because that time is really, really valued.
Hey, Tammy, would you just talk a little bit about their, I don't know if what they call it was a planning room or whatever, how they'd set that up. And it was 4 walls with whiteboard on it, and they were hitting every competency. They were showing how they were going to hit the competencies and all that. I don't know if you saw that. Maybe you didn't.
I didn't see that.
Seemed to me it was off the 3rd or 4th grade classroom.
Yeah, I did see where they had planned their projects for the first quarter, their collaborative planning. And every project that they plan has 4 components, and each grade level has their own, like the first graders are investigators, and the second graders are leaders, and they each have a different lens for which they approach a project or a topic. And what that affords is that, say they all want to do a research project on marine biology. Well, then kids can't say, oh, well, I learned all about that in 2nd grade already, because they're approaching those topics through a different lens, with a different purpose, and with a different audience for what they're showing. So that kind of helps too with some of that planning. Yeah, I didn't see that particular planning room. So if someone else gets to go to Epic and they take pictures of that, please post that on the Padlet. That would be awesome.
Thank you.
Yep, iReady, Lexia, and Imagine Math is what they were using there. Thank you for that. I didn't have that in front of me.
And we've had some questions going back and forth about the Leavenworth survey that they used for either students or parents, or maybe within their school. But Leavenworth, if you're on the line, if you want to share that on the Padlet, that would be great. If you want to send that to us, we can share it out to the group. I also, and didn't put this in it, I just responded to a couple that had asked about questions for a survey, but Santa Fe Trail Middle School in Olathe, so not Santa Fe Trail High School, but Santa Fe Trail Middle School in Olathe has a really nice survey for their parents about redesign. And I can send the contact information for Santa Fe Trail Middle School for that survey if people are looking for questions. Kelly Armberger also made reference that they used the redesign playbook to develop some redesign survey questions. So that's good. Are there any other shout outs to something you've done this week around redesign that you're proud of, that you want to discuss further?
So this is Christy Lentz from Leavenworth High School. I will be more than happy to share the survey on Padlet for our students. We were going to create one for our parents based off some of the questions, but I would be love to see the one from Santa Fe Middle School. The questions that we received were from the Innovative Schools Conference that we attended in Little Rock, Arkansas. So I'd be more than happy to share this. I'm going to do a couple of corrections this weekend, I should say, and I'll put them on there.
Great. Thanks, Christy. Okay, so we're going to go ahead and move on, but feel free to keep chatting away. Thanks to those of you who are able to attend the Mercury and the Gemini Mixer at the annual conference last week. I know that people's schedules are really busy all the time, but making time to come together and to collaborate as a Gemini school and Mercury schools together, we feel like was something that added a lot of value. We hope that you had a good time. Nobody danced, so we were a little disappointed with that. Max, I was expecting you to get out there pretty quickly, but didn't happen. But it seems like there were a lot of idea sharing and those kinds of things. And I know Tammy and I and Randy and Brad all felt really good about that mixer and how it went down. So thanks for being part of that. And I think Tammy's going to talk about the next event as far as collaboration for Mercury and Gemini.
Yeah, but before I do that, I also wanted to mention that as we've traveled this week, we were at Twin Valley and Stockton and Liberal this week. And they also, especially Stockton and Liberal, they were just so grateful to get to meet all of you that were there at the mixer, and they just couldn't stop talking about how great the conversations were and how and how supported they felt from you all, from the people that they talked to from the Gemini schools. And so, you know, we're just super proud of all of you, because, you know, as we, you know, initially there was this competition feel, and you know, if we're going to be competitive in redesign, let's make sure that Kansas is competing to make sure that that we lead the world. Let's not compete against each other. Let's collaborate and support each other and compete against the rest of the world. And so I think that that's how they felt too, that they felt really supported and encouraged.
Well said.
So we want you to mark a couple of dates on your calendar. On March 5th and 6th, the Kansans Can Symposium is taking place in Manhattan. That is sponsored by the Area Educational Service Centers, but they have been such great partners with us with Redesign that there's going to be a special strand just for Redesign, just for Mercury and Gemini schools. And so we encourage you to put that on your calendar, and we would encourage you to try to send as many of your Redesign team members as possible. You know, that we'll have opportunities for admin to collaborate, but the teachers on these Redesign teams are just dying to meet each other and talk and share ideas. And so we wanted to give you a heads up about that and have you mark that on your calendar.
So the next thing that we want to move to is just to provide all of you an update on where our Mercury schools are currently, and some next steps that they are heading into as we approach the end of this first semester. So we have created a more detailed timeline. I know that many of you have the Mercury timeline that's got the 4 phases and the nice colors and the graphics. That's more for public consumption. We tried to create more detailed for those linear thinkers out there like myself, more detailed, almost like a checklist of tasks that basically through this year for the Mercury schools that they need to complete to stay on track and to launch in August of 2018. So Tammy is sharing what that task list right there before you. It's on the Padlet, and I believe I shared it last night through Google with everybody, Gemini and Mercury both. So it is tailored just for the Mercuries, but that's only because the dates under the Mercury deadline column, those are all the dates to adhere to for Mercury schools. We know some of the Gemini schools. I've talked to you. You're trying to stay on the same timeline, so this could work for you. You can customize it. But where the Mercury schools are now, they have created their vision. They've communicated that to all stakeholders. They have developed a lag measure that measures their vision. So, for instance, a lag measure is something like high school graduation. It's something that's an outcome that happens after the work is done, lags behind the work. And so our schools have set vision statements, and then they need to make sure that they're measurable. So they've set a from X to Y by when. They've identified goal areas that support the vision. They've identified, in some cases, they've identified some metrics to measure each goal area. Just as a simple example of that is, academic and cognitive, using the ACT or using state assessments as their metrics for that. A goal area research teams are set, and that's where our Mercury schools are at this point in time. They're forming up their research teams and starting to kick them off with running down some things. And so that the next task that they're shooting towards is selecting lead measures to pilot. And lead measures are those actionable things those are really when it gets down to it, the redesign elements that schools will add into their system. And those are actions that you can take. And a lot of times it involves a change in human behavior. And so these lead measures are going to lead to and leverage the lag measures. And so they're really these research teams are looking at, okay, if we're trying to improve students' social emotional learning, what are the things that we can put in place that as far as redesigned elements into our system to really leverage and foster skill development and social emotional for our students. So those are the things that they're researching right now, and they're chasing down those lead measures that they want to pilot starting in January. And so that's what Tammy and I have been having conversations with the Mercury redesign teams about, how they're going to roll that out with their staff, because they're involving, in some cases, all staff in those goal research teams, in some cases staff that are motivated to jump on and start redesigning. So that's where the Mercury schools are right now as they move towards December.
Yeah, the other thing I would like to add is, while this is a very linear checklist, sometimes the work isn't quite so linear, right? Because sometimes they might have to do a bit of research before they really figure out what it is they're going to measure. And so as you make this checklist your own and put in your own dates, keep in mind that some of this conversation can get kind of mushy. It's not as linear as it looks on here. And so the other thing too is that the lag and lead measure vocabulary, if that seems confusing, go back to the playbook and read chapter 3, because it explains the same concept, the same process, but it uses terminology such as SMART goals and action steps. So if you are using Kansas Star to keep track of your work for KISA or for Title I or school improvement, you know that you have indicators, and then you have tasks, and it's really that same thing. It's the goal and the action steps. It's the from X to Y by when, and the lead measures. So don't get hung up on the terminology or the vocabulary. Just know that whatever you pilot or whatever you end up implementing, you're going to want to measure it, right, to figure out, is it working? Are we getting what we want out of this? A lot of that means that, right now is a really good time to be collecting your baseline data. Because at some point when you implement a redesign plan, 5 years down the road, people are going to say, well, why are we doing this? And you may not be there, but that why is, as long as that data and those checkpoints are there along the way, and you can show how things are so much different and better, that's going to keep that work to help it be more sustainable, and will help your continuous improvement process.
So from vision to measures to goals, and now into research teams. And we just wanted to talk a little bit about actually what these research teams will be doing. One is to set a clear objective of that research team. What are they actually pulling together in this effort? What are they wanting to accomplish? They're going through a process for collecting thoughts, ideas, and resources, much like a lot of the survey work that's going on. A lot of the surveys that are going on in the Mercury schools, the redesign team is taking that feedback from those surveys and handing it off to these research teams to start to dive in a little deeper. And one of the big things that schools are really spending some time on is, where do we find the time for research teams to meet? So everything from asking, coming in before school or after school, tweaking professional development schedules so that these research teams can meet, being really nimble with a professional development schedule that was probably set a year ago, right. And changing those things. So kudos to our schools to really feel like, this is important work. It needs to take precedent over some other things that are good things, but just not maybe to the level of impact that redesign can have. So finding the time for these research teams to meet has been a challenge, but we try to remind our Mercury schools, this is the important work, and to chase this down. So. And it's also, but I'll let Tammy talk a little bit more about the outcomes of these research teams, but it's also a great opportunity to engage the larger staff in the redesign project as you're moving forward.
Yeah, the other piece of this is, as redesign teams, as they're forming their research teams, members of the redesign team are charged with leading a research team, right? And so then what we end up with is we've got teachers that are on these redesign teams that don't necessarily have a lot of leadership experience with their colleagues. So we've been really, working on how to set up structures for the teachers to lead their colleagues through this research, what steps, how to hold them accountable, with the quite frank discussion that if a teacher is leading a group of other teachers through research and there's resistance or difficulty, it's not that teacher leader's role to deal with that's when the administrator needs to come in and support. So just really trying to equip, it's a great opportunity for some of our young teachers to get some leadership experience, and so being really intentional about setting them up for success as they work with their other staff. So some of the outcomes for some of these research teams is, right now there's so many exciting ideas, right? And so the redesign team is kind of narrowing some of those, brainstormed ideas into specific things that they want the research teams to research and look into and answer guiding questions such as, what is a common definition of whatever it is? Maybe it's personalized learning. What do we already have and what do we already do that could help support personalizing learning? What would we need? What kinds of resources? What kinds of time? What kinds of professional development would we need to fully implement? And then, and how would it benefit our students in our school? The real power of this is that it's, what you're building is very personalized as far as what your community needs and what your students need. Some of the things that are, we're starting to see little pockets of schools starting to pilot a few things. And so, for example, Meadowlark and Liberal, their 5th grade classes are piloting a personalized learning online platform and mixing up, that personalization with some projects. That was something they were already really interested in, and they ended up with some kind of free trial. So they're already, trying it out and making notes and documenting how it's going. So that's really exciting. Westview and Olathe, they're researching really tightly because they know that in January, they're going to change their schedule so that it will help them to pilot some multi-age classrooms and opportunities. But in order to be able to even pilot that, you've got to figure out the lunch schedule, the after school schedule, you all know that. So they want to have those things ready before Christmas so their staff knows that when they come back in January, their school day is going to look completely different. And then they have plans to try that in January, try a different kind of schedule and some other things in February so that they can make some decisions for March. So yeah, it's the end of October. And so, it's really, where the rubber hits the road. There's just a lot going on, a lot of thinking and a lot of planning.
And so one example of one of the research teams at Liberal High School, just to provide you some context. So everybody started with the why, and now they're starting to get in the what and how. And at Liberal High School, their vision is plan for today, vision for the future, and purpose for life. And so they've taken those 3 phrases and made goals out of those. And under the plan for today, it's not just simply students having a plan for each day. It's more about how can they problem solve, time management skills, a lot of social emotional. But one of the things that they're looking at Liberal High School is a flex mod schedule. And I know I talked a little bit about this at our last Zoom meeting, but Liberal is really, they formed up a flex mod schedule research team In fact, just this past week, they sent 28 staff members to a high school in Omaha. And I don't remember the name of the high school in Omaha, but they have one in Omaha that it is using a flex mod schedule. You know, Liberal traveled also to, with a much smaller contingency. They went up to Green Bay, Wisconsin and saw some schools, but that's one of their research teams is just on a schedule, a different schedule. And I can't do it justice during this meeting. So if you want to learn more about the flex mod schedule, I can connect you to Ashley Kappelman at Liberal High School. And there's some resources out there. But that's just an example. And so they're really running hard on the schedule because, as they talked about yesterday, you know, kids start free enrolling in February. And so if you're going to move to a different schedule, which the more we get into this and the redesign, the more it becomes apparent that if you really truly want to redesign at the secondary level, you really have to take on that monster of a schedule and make sure that it fits the vision that you have for redesign. I know there are a lot of modified block systems out there, and people are using those and tweaking those. But you know, a lot of times the schedule ends up being that one big obstacle in the room that people say, well, we can't do that because of our schedule. Change the schedule. And I know that's a lot easier said than done. But if you're interested in that flex mod schedule, Liberal High School is really running that down. So those are just some examples of topics that research teams in our Mercury schools are running down.
Melissa said there are some training videos on YouTube regarding flex mod scheduling. And she reviewed them after the last Zoom meeting. Max says, please connect us to Liberal. Okay, super. All right. So, so I wanted to let you know that we talked last time about Epic Elementary and visiting there. If you want to go to Epic Elementary, I've got kind of some sad news, and that is that right now their waiting list is over 100 schools. We're trying to figure out how maybe our redesigned schools can jump that waiting line. But you know, they are in Missouri, so you know, they may not, you know, Kansas redesign might not be high on their list of priorities. So if you are going, if you do have an appointment to get to Epic Elementary, if you could just take as many pictures as possible and be willing to post them up on the Padlet. I know Epic has a really nice website with some great videos, but if you want to go to Epic Elementary, get your name on that list now, and you know, maybe you can go next year, right? So there is that. I am super excited though that, you know, Jay and I next week are traveling to Tulsa, Oklahoma to visit some Summit Learning schools. I will be visiting McClure Elementary School. They are a Summit Elementary school. They do project-based learning and personalized learning using the Summit platform. And that Summit platform is free. For real, honestly and truly. If you're interested in playing with it, you can go to Summit Learning and you can enter some information and you can have access to the platform. All of the curriculum and the lessons that are there are aligned to Common Core. And the only thing is that they only have lessons for 4th grade through 12th grade, right? So for the younger elementary, they don't have anything pre-made, but that platform is adaptable. And so I'm really curious to see what McClure is doing with their kindergarten through 3rd graders, because their entire school is a Summit school. They were a super low performing Title I school on improvement, really, really dismal state assessment scores, high poverty, around 400 students in the building. So I'm really excited to go there and see what they're doing. Jay, you want to talk a little bit about the school that you're going to go visit?
Sure. So in Tulsa, they have a middle school. I think they call it a junior high. Memorial Junior High in Tulsa is a summit school. And so when I contacted the principal, they were on fall break, but she graciously allowed us to come in next week on Wednesday. And it's curious because the way the schedule works, they have a full day where it's just one-on-one mentoring, I think weekly. So I don't know how they do it, but it's one-on-one, each student, one teacher, for a full day. And so that's an interesting piece to run down, because I know that a lot of our schools are really looking at how do we personalize education and provide, that one coach, that one adult mentor in the building for each student. So, but the Summit platform is a free online platform that they use, that students can use to really track their own progress. So if you're interested in like a competency-based education model, I know there's some questions from last time about that, but that Summit platform, they're sponsored by Mark Zuckerberg and Facebook and the Gates Foundation. So it's got a lot of weight behind it. There aren't that many schools across the nation that are Summit schools. There's like 40 or 41. So to have some in Tulsa, we felt like was good. It's a short trip. So we feel like it's a good, on the outside looking in so far, it looks like a good online platform to allow students to accelerate. It also allows teachers to monitor progress very easily through that medium. And I know that it syncs with student information systems. So we're going to be really anticipating those meetings next week and being ready to share out when we come back from those and getting that information back out. Just one other school visit that we wanted to highlight. Well, did you want to talk about Twin Valley?
Oh, yeah. Twin Valley went to Lawrence last week. Lawrence, they have an elementary school and then Free State High School.
Right.
One of their elementary schools is moving to personalizing learning and project-based learning. They're in year 2 or year 3 of implementing, so they are just a little bit ahead of what some of you all are doing. So it was really a good meeting for them to talk, about the hiccups and bumps of initially implementing something, and that modifying all the time. They got to see some really interesting examples of like flexible spaces and flexible learning spaces. They had time, I believe, with the district leaders to talk about, how Lawrence got to that point. So I think that it was a worthwhile trip for the Tuscan elementary staff when they went. Lawrence was just so gracious, and I know that they would be gracious if you're curious about going there, but they're also so humble. They feel like, we're not very far down this road, so they're really transparent about sharing their lessons learned and the lessons that they're learning. So if you're interested in visiting Lawrence, let me know and I'll get you the contact information, because they like to organize visits through their district office. They have a protocol for that. But yeah, kudos to Lawrence for being such gracious hosts to that group, and just their willingness to be transparent and say, hey, this is what we're trying. We don't have it all figured out yet. It's not quite perfect. So I think that was a worthwhile trip.
And one other school that took a trip was McPherson Middle School. They went to New York City, the Big Apple, to look at ACT Tessera. So ACT Tessera is a new product that measures, it's an assessment, but it's also got a lot more than just an assessment, but it's an assessment of students on the social emotional realm. So ACT Tessera, there's there's assessments, and I think it goes down to 6th grade. So 6th grade through 12th grade, a suite of assessments on social emotional learning. And they also have lesson plans, resources, those kinds of things around social emotional learning. McPherson Middle School, one of their big goals is social emotional, as is many of our Mercury schools. And so they wanted to run down a metric for that, and they were looking at ACT Tessera. They also visited a middle school in New York City called Teach to One. I think it started out as a School of One, and then it's changed names to Teach to One. So it was more of a personalized learning school there in New York City. So just a couple of other examples of things and schools that people are going out and taking a look at. So I think at this point we'll move to a discussion question. If you're looking at that timeline that we've spent quite a bit of time here this morning on for the Mercuries, if you're looking at that timeline starting with vision and moving down, where are you as a district, or maybe at the building level, where are you on that timeline? Kind of find where your teams are at, and what do you need to do to get to the next step. So Tammy and I are just going to go silent here, take a break, and let you discuss that in your teams. If you're by yourself, feel free to use the private chat if you want to, but take 5 minutes and just discuss where you think you are on the timeline, maybe at each building level or at the district level, and what do you need to do to get to the next step. And then as you start to come to some conclusions on things or ideas, feel free to use the chat function, and then we'll come back together in 5 minutes and talk. Okay, well, we're just happy that most of you stayed on. We were kind of concerned that you might think that was the end of the meeting, but thanks for putting these things in the chat, and hopefully as a team, or you were able to kind of identify where you are on the timeline. A lot of you added to the chat. Thank you very much. And a lot looks like are working on their vision and looking for ways to survey their wider community, parents, students, community members, those kinds of things. And that's work that the Mercury schools, we really felt like was important, because at the end of this thing, the why should always be something that really drives it. There's going to be a lot of bumps in the road, obstacles. I know Randy shared a really nice slide last week. There'll be doubters, there'll be obstacles, but what remains is your why. And I'm paraphrasing that and I'm missing it, but basically that why is what's going to drive this. So spending time on it and making sure the community, school, the students, everybody's behind it is so crucial. So that's great work. Looks like a lot of people are at that level. So, and hopefully you talked about the next step and where you're going. At this point, we're getting a little close to time, so I think we'll move on and talk about just a couple last minute resources that we found that might be helpful. I'll start with Education Elements is a group that we follow on Twitter that has a lot of personalized learning resources. And we're actually working individually, or actually Tammy and I are coaching or being coached by somebody from Education Elements who's a Kansas native, and we're excited to have her on board, Angela Chubb. And so one of their resources that we felt might have some application, especially in light of many of you are talking about how to reach out to parents. They have a guide to talking with parents on Redesign, and I posted it on Padlet.
Are you still seeing my screen?
Yes.
Okay.
And so right there, Tammy pulled that up. Thank you very much. And it's just got some bulleted items that are good reminders, things that parents might be wondering about through Redesign. I know the messaging has to be very, very good and tight for parents. And so we felt like that might be something to help you all move forward as you message Redesign with parents.
A couple of other articles and resources we've added just within the last couple of days is there Marzano research on personalized learning. There's a guide for administrators. I gave you the link. It is a resource that you would have to pay for, but we all know and respect Marzano work, and so I wanted to make sure that you had a link to that. And then over in latest news, Betsy DeVos did visit a public summit learning school this week. There's an article from EdSurge about what she saw and what she thought. And I think anytime we have someone from the U.S. Department of Ed who is interested in something that we are also interested in Kansas, it's got to be a good thing. So I wanted to share that with you. There's a really great article here on why a high achieving district keeps tinkering with a school model that already worked. Sometimes schools can get stuck in the, well, we already do that. We already do that pretty well. And so this article just highlights that we won't do better. We should do better if we know better. And so just wanted to share that with you as well. The timeline we just showed you, the link is right here. So we wanted to make sure that was available to you. And then the Zoom meeting recordings are right here. We're getting, the last one was a little slow in coming, not because it wasn't ready, but because we didn't know where to find the link. So we should be able to have this posted by early next week for your other staff members to listen to.
So we just wanted to wrap up with one last discussion question. What questions do you have about other KSDE initiatives, state policies, et cetera? And Tammy alluded to this at the beginning. We may not know the answers. I know Corey from Fowler had a question that I need to follow up on just to provide some more context. But that's definitely our role, is to connect you with state policies, people that lead those policies or decide those, or different initiatives that may be unanticipated obstacles that are out there that we don't know about. So if you have any questions about other KSD initiatives or state policies, feel free to throw it in the chat, and we'll run those down, or we may be able to answer them today. So we'll give you a couple minutes to do that. Well, I do know that we had some questions last time about contact hours, work-based learning experiences off-site, and how that works with auditors and counting time. So for those of you who are interested in that, we are going to be convening a meeting fairly quickly within the next week with Craig Nineswander, who's our in finance, school finance, and Laurel Murdy, who's our head auditor, to talk about some of those issues that have come up with work-based learning and the hours or minutes requirement for a full-time enrolled student. So here's a couple questions. Have either one of us visited Erie's high school project-based learning classroom? I have not. I've heard a lot about it. Yeah, and I think it's gone through some iterations, Chris, that where it got started and was on fire, and then they had a change in leadership and it kind of went away, and now with Steve Wolf's leadership, it's back. So it would be a good model. I know of some schools that have gone down to visit it, but I have not. It's kind of a school within a school where the students, to my knowledge, the students can earn core credit in kind of an accelerated timeline. And I think it's student select. So students maybe apply to get in. Steve would know more, Steve Wolf at Erie, but they can through a project-based learning environment, they can earn math, science, social studies, English credit through that project-based learning environment rather than being in the typical classrooms.
Another question says, any suggestions on nesting issues in CTE, especially for small schools trying to redesign?
So you can nest, and that's something that we work to make more flexible in the last few years. The only thing with nesting is just make sure that you have approval from the consultant that oversees that pathway that you need to nest courses. There's a lot of schools in that situation, Kelly, where they've got, virtually 3 pathway courses for an approved pathway, and you may have 1 or 2 students enrolled in each section. And you want to be able to teach those with one teacher. You probably, a lot of cases there's 1 teacher for a pathway. And so to nest those together, that is possible. You just need to make sure you've got that cleared with the consultant who oversees that pathway.
Melissa had said, I know we've spoken already, Jay, but state auditors and finance people pose a few obstacles to the redesign process.
Yeah, and it's a mix of, Melissa, thanks for putting that out there. It's a mix of flexibility, but also accountability. And so we've just got to find the right mix. So thanks for being an advocate for that, and I'll be in contact with you.
And training for Kansas Star. I found one in Lindsborg hosted by Southwest Plains. It seems that if we are supposed to track our progress on this site, then someone needs to provide training for it statewide. Yeah, that is on the title team here at KSDE. I will touch base with Pat Hill. I believe she's the one that's overseeing some of that at this time, just to try to figure out where. It seems to me they have a training schedule. I'll try to find a link to that, or have Pat send us a link and we'll post it on the Padlet. Because yeah, that Kansas Star is a fantastic tool, but it's a little complex. There are also, I'll post this to the Padlet too, the Kansas Learning Network just posted this week some modules on training for Kansas Star. I'll post those as well. Always looking for other middle schools that are in full implementation of a program like this. Outside of Kansas would also be okay.
So, Monty, the Memorial Junior High in Tulsa, Tammy and I and Brad will be traveling there next week, so we'll bring that back. That would be good.
Mm-hmm. And great stuff on education and best practices on Twitter at Ted Fujimoto. That's one I don't think we're following.
Well, thanks, Kelly. We'll be following Ted pretty quickly here.
Let me just scroll up and make sure we didn't miss any other questions. Okay, I think that's all of the ones in the chat so far.
And I'm just adding in real quick here in the chat, Steve Wolf at Erie High School. So Chris, thanks for that plug for Erie High School. A lot of times we think things that happen outside the state are where we need to go, but in our own backyard, we've got really good examples. So thanks for bringing that to the forefront. And if anybody is interested in project-based learning and earning core credits through that medium, a lot like the Most Likely to Succeed type of model, contact Steve Wolf at Erie High School, or at Erie Schools. He's the superintendent if you're interested. So I'll put that in the chat. Okay, well, I think we'll end our meeting. As always, we'll stay on for a few minutes if people have some specific things that we wanted to dive deeper into. But other than that, I hope everyone has a great weekend. We'll get this link sent out sooner. And so if you missed part of this, or if you have colleagues that wanted to listen in, we'll have that link posted on the Padlet very soon. So yeah, so everybody have a great weekend. I know the Chiefs fans out there are a little down today, but hopefully your other teams will win this weekend to bring you back up. So take care, everybody.
Ooh, I have a really good question up here. Ooh, this is a fun one. Will the redesign override state law, such as paying for college credits?
So Corey, if you're listening, the redesign will not override state law. I mean, there may be some state laws that we look into that do need to be changed, but the one that's, Senate Bill 155 pays for college CTE credits. So that's already in place. But if you're talking about other sorts of college credits, and Randy talked last week at the annual conference a little bit with the Council of Supes about the first 15, that those 5 core classes that it seems like every student has to take at the college level, in setting up a way that similar to Senate Bill 155, that the tuition, if high school students want to take the first 15 while they're in high school, that the state could pay their tuition, much like Senate Bill 155. But that would have to be legislation. So there's some things out there that are being proposed. It's not necessarily overriding state law, but it would be definitely suggesting some new legislation. Got some Dodgers fans out there.
What about teacher licensure, such as innovative school overrides?
Well,
I think we'd have to look at that on a case-by-case basis and take it to licensure, right?
Yeah, I know the innovative schools, that was what being an innovative school seemed to be about, was you were being some of the teacher licensure was going to be more flexible. But really what happened even before the innovative schools got going was KSDE, our teacher and licensure, created a lot of flexibility. It's just a lot of people don't take the time to read the fine print. So there's actually a lot more flexibility in teacher licensure than I think a lot of people are led to believe. So, but certainly everything is on the table. If we are serious about redesigning our schools, and if there are some state policies or laws that stand in the way, we've got to take those on. And we have a policy group formed up for the redesign project, made up of the leads at KBOR, KNEA, USA, all those different groups that can help us mitigate some of these obstacles that are popping up. So, but we just need to keep talking about it.
Well, and we probably need specifics, as far as, Corey, what you're specifically thinking of. If you could shoot that to us in an email, that would give us a specific scenario to take to our advisory group.
And I'm also going to call Corey after this.
Okay, well, there you go.
She had some other questions, so.
All right. We'll sign off here for today. Oh, is the most likely to succeed documentary available to the public, or is it a pay to use them? That is the most tightly held video I think I've ever experienced, because it's not available electronically. You can't get to it to a link. You just have to go to their website and order it. And they give you a DVD, but it's with the kind of license that you would have if you were to show it in a movie theater. So it is not cheap. We don't even, at KSDE, we don't even own a copy of it. We had to borrow a copy of it when we showed it. So, Jay, do we know where they might be able to borrow a copy?
Oh, there's from Max. So they spent $175 to show it today.
Oh.
I know that when I looked at it this summer, it was $350 to rent it and have a viewing party.
Yeah.
So maybe they've reduced that, but it's still pretty expensive.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's like Tammy said, it's really tightly held.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
But I suppose everything we pay to use it supports their school, right? So.
Yeah, we've been trying to track down a copy, and but it's been really, really hard. The only thing that we got at the beginning of the summer. We talked them into we had a copy of it for 14 days for free.
Right. So we did have a link to that, because
we shared it. But
we had a free 14-day window for anyone who wanted to use it. But
need to probably hit them up again. Maybe you can hit them up. I hit them up last time.
Okay, well maybe
you hit them up. We'll figure it out.
Sound like we're a different entity. I don't know. How long is it? It's a little over an hour, about an hour 15. right?
I think it's an hour and a half.
Is it an hour
Yep,
and a half?
hour and a half.
Feel free to email us with questions, tmitchell@ksde.org or jscott, JSCOTT @ksde.org. We'll try to answer your questions as they come, or post them to the Padlet. If there are questions that other schools might be able to answer, you know, put it under highlights from schools. Put your request out there. A lot of people are watching the Padlet. They might be able to help you sooner than Jay or I could.
Awesome.
All right.
All right. We'll
Thanks,
talk to you in a couple
everyone.
weeks.
Have a good weekend.
Take care.